Hello, dear FinTech community, and very welcome to this presentation of the CEE Fintech Atlas by Raiffeisen Bank International, RBI. It's my pleasure to host this event. Daniel Vicevic is my name, the co-founder of Broadcasten, which is Austria's startup and innovation platform. This FinTech Atlas is a very important work that the RBI is doing from my perspective. It's been done for the second time. 19 ecosystems in the CEE have been analyzed, and we will have a lot of data, a lot of figures on different KPIs, on investments, on fintechs, on trends. And we also have a special focus this year on open banking, and we'll hear about the reason for that and how this atlas came to be, what are, so to say, the key findings of it. And let me introduce shortly the agenda for today. We have two short keynotes, very, so to say, on point, and then a very, very good panel discussion with distinguished panelists from all over CEE, from Austria, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary. And very grateful for all the speakers who have taken time to join us in this discussion. It's really my pleasure, and I'd like to thank RBI for doing this work. Max Schossberger told me, the managing director of the Elevator Ventures, the venture capital, so to say, arm of Raiffeisen Bank RBI, told me that only 3% of the investments in Europe go into the CEE region, which, according to the talent in this region, seems to be not quite enough for us. So I'm very, very happy and grateful that they're giving the stage for fintechs in the CEE region, for the audience, for the banks, for the investors, and creating this community, which is very important for the development and scalability of the talent in the region. I will not keep you too long in this introduction. I'd like to start with our first keynote and introduce to you Christian Wulff, the head of strategic partnerships and ecosystems of Raiffeisen Bank International. He will be talking about open banking, a very important topic, as I mentioned already before, one of the focus topics of CEE Fintech Atlas this year. And we will hear a very good overview, which role does this open banking play within the RBI group. Christian, may I hand over to you, please, your keynote.
Thank you, Dejan, and thanks for introducing us and giving us the opportunity to talk a little bit about open banking. As Dejan just mentioned, the very core topic of this year's edition of our FinTech Atlas. Why we chose so? Because if you look back in the history, if you look back in the past few years, there was a European regulation coming up, namely PSD2, the Payment Services Directive, and the concept of open APIs actually initially shook the traditional banking system. When the directive was issued back in 2015, the concept of allowing client data to leave more or less the bank or the premises of the bank was something very hard to accept to a traditional banker. At that time, fintechs were also mostly seen as disruptors and a potential threat to the financial services industry. And that changed quite significantly since then. Back then, there was a feeling that leveraging what PSD2 was allowing then, namely the access to client data, given, of course, the customer's consent, that leveraging these advantages would actually create a new kind of competition out of the fintech area, and that this competition would get more and more aggressive. In addition, we had seen a quite big pace and a quick pace in changing customer demand. So actually, partnering with fast developing, bold fintechs would have allowed, or will and does allow banks to leverage smarter and more flexible solutions to especially cater to these changing customer needs. And fintechs, on the other side of that story, they also changed their roles. They became from disruptors, they took the role of facilitators. They took the role of enablers of a revolutionary banking transformation journey. And further, in CE, in our core markets, and even in countries where we do not have something like the PSD2 regulation, we see that the market offers many examples of cooperations between fintechs and corporations and other institutions. In addition to that, following up on the open banking concept, also the view of the banks on the open banking changed quite significantly. It paved the way for collaboration and cooperation and the creation of completely new financial ecosystems. And Rather than competing with banks, we've seen fintechs offering their services based on the safe banking infrastructure and the transparent use of data via newly established APIs. And in all CE countries, collaboration between fintechs represents actually a quite promising climate for innovation and for new technological possibilities and progress. But when it comes to us, RBI as a bank, open banking does not only mean PS2. It does not only mean APIs. For us, it means openness in banking. It means openness in technology. It means openness in interconnectivity and connection in general. And it means openness in teaming up. So we ultimately see open banking as a major driver for partnerships, out of which fintechs that actually get a very special stage today here with our latest edition on the FintechAtlas Atlas are at the very core. Strategic partnerships are actually already since long in Raiffeisen's DNA. Raiffeisen's principles are based on the cooperative principles conceived by social reformer Friedrich Wilhelm Raiffeisen. And RBI still strongly believes that in value co-creation and co-innovation, the exact things that already have been conceived before. So we could say that we try to make our past as a forming building block into our future. And therefore we created some vehicles to drive both internal and external co-creation and enable the bank to leverage on its own CE ecosystem. Our award-winning FinTech partnership program, Elevator Lab, is an invitation for fintechs into the Raiffeisen ecosystem. Some other of these vehicles here in that slide are established based on technologies and concepts that are believed to play an integral part in shaping new cooperations with external parties. One example, for instance, is our blockchain hub that works on exciting use cases based on the blockchain, a technology that unfolds, in our point of view, its full potential only in a cooperative environment. We also have our OpenAPI initiative. OpenAPI, you can see as an equally technology-driven means to foster digital partnerships. And not to forget, we have our innovation garden, our RBI's entrepreneurship program that also embraces value co-creation internally. And not to forget, actually, Elevator Ventures, your trustful equity partner to push fintech business even further. But we also want to take the cooperation concept itself to another level, and we are looking consequently more and more into cross-industry value co-creation cases and the enablement of beyond banking products and services. You see that we believe we don't see open banking in a very narrow sense. Open banking for us is our next steps toward openness, toward innovative value co-creation, and we actually all invite you to approach us, team up, and build the new banking of the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian, for your keynote. It was a pleasure to hear the latest updates on the open banking from RBI. For those of you who joined us a little bit later, very warm welcome to you too. We're at the presentation of the FintechAtlas Atlas 2019 CEE Fintech Atlas by RBI. Exciting presentation, so to say, very thorough work, so to say, a lot of analysis, a lot of research that has been done on this atlas. And I'm glad that we're presenting the whole topic of open banking, open data here on this location. We're hosted today by TribeSpace. They're doing their, so to say, technology for data economy and data, so to say. So it's very good that we're presenting in here. We're getting ready for our second keynote, which will be on the market development in Central and Eastern Europe. Günther Däuber, the head of economics, fixed income and research of Raiffeisen Bank International, will be presenting this to us. Exciting data research that they have. He's the designated group head of the research department. So we have a lot of insights. I think that I can tell you that investment banks of international, so to say, high positions knock on their door and so to say, have their papers on their desks. Very valuable data that we have here. I can see that Günther is already ready, and I would like to hand over to you. Thank you for your insights.
Thanks for the kind introduction, and I'm happy also to be here and to share some of our core views on the region and some of the data we digged into with you. So we have to start with the economy, and we have to accept we live in exceptional times. We will have a GDP drop that is dramatic in most of our countries in our region. The regional GDP will shrink by 200, 300 billion euros this year. This means there will be a pressure on payment flows and on everything in the banking industry that is associated to the economic wealth. So definitely a crisis, but on the other hand, the digital catch-up progresses at full speed due to the very specific crisis circumstances. And we have seen that customer behavior thinking is changing dramatically and the willingness to engage digitally. And this is very important because our region still has a certain way to go in the digital catch-up, but we have seen substantial progress. So this is shown here. And to go back maybe a few years, we had around 50% on average of the population in our region, in our countries, being really digitally active customers of the banks. We see this currently at 65%. So currently every year, and maybe this year even more, 5, 6, 7% of the population are getting digitally active customers in our region. This means the customer base is continuously growing. There is still some room to catch up. You see some markets like Slovakia or Slovenia already rather sophisticated in the digital penetration. Others can still catch up nicely. We expect that this trend will continue over the next few years, and definitely a growth market for the banks in terms of client acquisition and also flows that are associated to this growing client base. And this brings us to the concept of partnerships between the banks active in the region and fintechs, and why this is maybe even of very special importance in the region. We have very high market shares of foreign-owned banks in the region. This is the difference to Western Europe. So Western banks are sitting on market shares of 40, 50, 60% of the market in at least the more Western Central European countries. So we have a digitally active population currently in CEE that we estimate around 200 million people, and the large Western banks have a digitally active client base that we see at roughly 50 million in the region. So this is a good basis from our understanding also for scalable solutions in the region across the countries. And this is a rather unique setting. In most Western European markets, you have national champions dominating the banking sectors, while in CEE, we have these Western banks, cross-border banks operating in several markets and offering on rather small markets, but the option for scaling solutions across the countries. And the digital readiness in our region is there. Even if you look at some broader indices going beyond banking, you see that some of our countries in the region are close to what you can say are the Euro area Big Four. So this is Germany, France, Italy, Spain, in terms of their digital readiness, as measured by the Digital Readiness Index by Cisco. And most of the countries are definitely well ahead of what I call the global average in terms of digital readiness. And on the right-hand chart, you see in some of the markets, the digital readiness in banking is even higher than the overall digital readiness. So we see a lot of attractive markets and banking sectors that are close to Western market standards, or EU regulation, as it was mentioned previously, plays an important role. We have some banking sectors that are really advanced in terms of their digital readiness, among the leading, I would say, banking sectors even in Europe. There are other markets where there is still a long way to go, but definitely you can apply also more sophisticated tools from other markets there. And we see the current crisis as a good opportunity for banks, fintech partnerships, because lending products are getting much more important this time around. Definitely something which is still the core competence of the banks. And secondly, large institutions like us have become much more flexible in implementing digital approaches in this crisis. And I think this is a good basis for partnership based also on the lending expertise the banks are having. So this is all from my side. trying to give you a snapshot overview over the region and its digital readiness and the potential for partnerships across the countries in the region.
Thank you, Gunther, very much. I can hear digital applause going around for you. Thank you for this presentation and very fresh data that you've provided to us. And let's move on. The panel on the FinTech, on the CEE Atlas, and I'd like to ask both of our studio guests, Max and Michael, to join me on stage. And consequently, I will introduce the whole panel. Please, Max, take your seat here, Michael there, and we will start with our discussion. So we have really distinguished panel with us. And I'll start with Michael, with you. Michael Altrichter is business angel, impact investor, and startup commissioner from Austria since 20 years in the fintech space as founder and investor. Michael, it's great to have you here.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this panel.
Perfect. Let's take another one from our Zoom call. So we're doing this event fully virtually, fully digitally, as it is, so to say, the use in the Corona times. Thank you for joining us from all over the CE space. Cosmin Cosma, co-founder and CEO of the FinTech Thinkware from Romania and the member of the board of FinTech Association from Romania. Cosmin, welcome and thank you for taking your time.
Thank you for inviting me, and looking forward to speak open on the developments in fintech in CE.
Perfect. Then we have Maximilian Schossberger, Managing Director of Elevator Ventures. Max, servus and welcome in our studio.
Servus, good to be here.
Good to have you here. Then we have Aniko Sombati, Chief Digital Officer from the Central Bank of Hungary. Aniko, super and great to have you here. Thank you for your time.
Hello, good afternoon.
And last but not least, Valery Valchev, Chairman of the Bulgarian FinTech Association. Valery, welcome on our stage.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
Max, let me start with you. I'd like to ask you about the short introduction of the CEE Fintech Atlas of 2019, and especially why did you choose the focus or the special focus on the digital banking, on the open banking?
Yes, so it is amazing to see again this publication of the CEE Fintech Atlas, and there have been again so many people throughout the region involved in producing this publication. We have people from inside our banking group, but this time also a lot of contributions from people from fintech associations, from national banks, from fintechs themselves. And I think in this way, we have here a very good overview from different perspectives on the developments in CEE, in fintech in the last year. And this is exactly what we wanted to produce. We are actively engaging with the fintech ecosystem, with the banks that we have there, with our elevator labs, the partnership programs, with our venture capital arm. And we see so much potential in the region. And as you mentioned in the introduction, we think that there is still not the spotlight on the region that it actually deserves to have. And we also see there's a role for a large corporate as we are, and as a Raiffeisen Group to contribute to get visibility on this region. And we hope that this FinTech Atlas can contribute to that.
You guys have a footprint, I think, in 14 CE countries. Do you see active fintech communities in all of these ecosystems?
Absolutely. And I think this is also the key message of this year's CEE Fintech Atlas again. Fintech in CEE is big and it's growing. And due to this very particular market environment, a lot of people with very interesting backgrounds are founding fintech. A lot of people with highly relevant educational background, technical background, and especially in the new technologies when it comes to artificial intelligence, blockchain and other topics, we see a lot of dynamics in the region. And this is where what we want to actually highlight also with the CEE Fintech Atlas. There is growth in investment. There is what especially is, I think, a very positive development. There is growth in investment from local investors. So we see in countries like Hungary, in countries like Bulgaria and Romania, we have the speakers here, also here in Austria, we see that more and more, actually, we are not dependent anymore from venture capital from outside of our region, but we can do a lot already on our own. And I think here, this we need to develop further together as a region.
Fantastic. One of the special focus topics of this atlas was also the topic of open banking, and obviously driven through the regulation PSD, so to say, directive of the European Union. I'd like to ask you all, how did you cope with the implementation in your particular countries? Max, maybe let's start with the RBI, and then I'll be asking, obviously, all of you guys across the Europe, how did you cope with the implementation? What kind of learnings did you have with it? And obviously then, as a next question, what does it mean for fintechs? What kind of impact does it have on impact?
I mean, Christian Wulff just already described it, but maybe from my side, from a VC perspective, I think that open banking as a trend and PSD2 as an enabler is a game changer for fintech. You can really build on what the regulator actually wants to achieve with this opening up, and also what banks see as a potential in these open banking. You can build a lot of new business models where it is, as Christian said, not about competition between fintech and banks, but it's actually about a win-win situation. And from a VC perspective, having an application from a fintech that is actually building on the trend of open banking, is actually one of the criteria. If someone comes to me and does not have an idea on how to use the open banking trend, I think they would miss one of the most important trends.
Annika, from a perspective of a central bank, how did Hungary cope with the implementation of this directive? Do you have any insights for us on this topic?
Yes, thank you for the question. So actually, we see that that we managed the implementation very well, and actually we are expecting our market to reap the benefits that are provided by the regulation. So the PSD2 itself wants to open the banking data to fintechs, which at the outset suggests that this creates some kind of competition in between the banks and the fintechs for the customers. But on the other hand, if we regard open banking as a new philosophy and we look at the way that banks and fintechs can also cooperate to enhance the bank's capabilities, then it's a completely different picture. To put it short, the Hungarian banking system already realized the potential in this new methodology or way of operation. However, we have only very limited number of fintechs who already have licenses like the AISP or the PISP licenses. So we would like also to have more international fintechs actively entering the market and connecting to our banks.
What do you think when you mentioned when fintechs maybe don't have some kind of certificates or some kind of licenses? Are banks a good partner to cover that part? For example, in a cooperation, we're building a mutual product. Annika, maybe I'll start with you, and then I invite the rest as well to discuss on that.
So actually, the banks themselves also have to work on the APIs to be conformable with the expectations. But we think that these licensing requirements seem to be a little bit tough for the fintechs. So to help them to acquire these licenses, the central bank has a specific program called Innovation Hub, where the fintechs can approach the central bank with a specific question when they have any difficulties or when specific requirements are not clear in the regulation itself. They can ask the central bank staff, and we are, as they help to overcome these obstacles and help them to acquire the license as quickly as possible.
Cosmin, what about in Romania? What is the situation there? You're both, I think, investor, founder, and board member in the FinTech Association. They have a fantastic overview about the ecosystem. What was the impact of the implementation of the directive on your fintechs?
So right now, Romania is still not with the product live in open banking. For me, it's very an inside vision because we are an API aggregator for open banking. So we know the market. We are testing in our lab, let's say, all the APIs right now in the market. Most probably in 1 or 2 months, we will launch with 2 or 3 of our customers, which are the banks, because the banks are the first layer of consuming the data from the other banks. And we are right now preparing with our prospects the launch of multi-banking in their digital online channels. I can say that all the banks at least struggled a lot to be compliant, to put it in a way. And right now they are very collaborative with us. Under the, not in the public, in front of the public, because we are preparing this backstage. They are very collaborative with us to make them the APIs working in a good manner. In terms of regulation, indeed, like Aniko said, there is a big thing to be done by the national banks in each and every country. Because not the Innovation Hub, we also have an Innovation Hub that was launched last year by the National Bank of Romania. But there is something to be to come very fast, which is regulatory sandboxes. Because otherwise, as Aniko said, I need to go to Big Four. So for example, we are right now in the process of acquiring the license for this. I have 3 different teams of consultants from Big Four, from one of the top law firms in Romania, and another technical company in consulting in our auditing part. So in order to take this license for a fintech, you need to be very well financed with the capital from the VCs and to be compliant. A regulatory sandbox, which is the name of the game for UK, for example, or for other countries that already are starting with big speed this open banking, a regulatory sandbox can be the potential solution to boost open banking implementation in all our countries in CE.
Fantastic. Michael Altrichter, this is a super topic to discuss with you as well. 20 years ago, I think you co-founded PaySafeCard, and I think you told me you had in Germany and in Austria different banks and had to provide thousands of pages of documents to license your business. So I think you can feel with the fintechs dealing with this topic right now.
Absolutely. So my own history is now 20 years in startup business, co-founding PaySafeCard, a payment company 20 years ago. And by that time, able to share this story with a few sentences. By the time there were no e-money license, no PSD, and a sandbox was a word nobody even know. So we founded a company to sell prepaid cards on the internet for payment on the internet, which is called PaySafeCard. They look like this. You buy it in the grocery store wherever you want, and then you can pay online. And quickly after we founded the company, we were aware that, oops, this is a banking product. So what shall we do as a young startup? Shall we get our own banking license? Of course, this was not possible for a young startup by the time. So we came then to the outsourcing contracts with Commerzbank in Germany that they as a bank issue these means of payment. And later in the year 2003, it came, we were aware that now the e-money licenses are coming up. And it was very funny. We talked to the Austrian FMR, to the banking authority in Austria, can we please apply for an e-money license? By the time they had just trouble with the banking Babak scandal, REFCO scandal. So they were not very happy that now a new startup is applying for this new e-money license. And they literally told us, yes, you can apply, but it will take a year or so that you get the license. And at the same time, I asked a guy in UK, in London, I forgot his name, but I never forgot his sentence. He was like a salesperson. He said, yes, come to UK, we will license you. And that's why we moved to UK for the licensing thing. And we were the number 17 in UK. So in Austria, we would have been the first one. And it was for me so clear that UK by that time was the clear number one in financing and banking. To end this story, now as we all know that UK is going out of the EU, this is the chance now for the rest of EU, for Vienna. And that's why I'm so fascinating that we are talking these topics to back offshore them, now these financial issues, to enable startups to start the business in Vienna and the whole CEE regions. By the way, to end the story with PaySafeCard, just to having said that, it's a very successful company right now. It was exited in 2012, and today 300 employees are sitting here in Vienna, and more than 100 millions of those PaySafeCards, 100 millions are sold every year and used on the internet. So it turned out to be a successful showcase in Austria to the whole world in the fintech payment.
I mean, it's super interesting topic that you're opening. Valerie, I've been told that Bulgaria is one of the leading countries in the fintech space. So do you think that there is some kind of competition on the countryside as to who can provide the best circumstances, the best regulative sandboxes and circumstances for fintechs to grow their business in those countries? Are we seeing any competition on the regulatory side between the ecosystems?
There is clearly competition between the different regions. Now, mostly the competition is coming from the companies themselves, not so much from the regulator. And the regulators trying to implement some new policies. Actually, in Bulgaria, we are fighting that, and we are pushing hard so that the regulation changes in some aspects in order to be able to set up more Bulgarian companies. But I want to say an interesting fact that 2 years ago, I was speaking with one of the top bankers in Bulgaria, and he was saying, you know what, there was just this FintechAtlas Atlas being published by RBI, and you're not there. Why are you saying that there is fintech in Bulgaria? So we set up the Bulgarian Fintech Association, and we are trying to have ourselves heard across the whole of Europe. We are trying to nurture more companies so that they can get fundings and they can do exits later on. And this way there will be much more happening in Bulgaria. Now, in terms of open banking, there is only one company in Bulgaria doing that at the moment, but they're about to get funding now, so I think they're moving in the right direction. And I can see at least 10 clients that they can get immediately. Even with one of my companies, we are going to be a client of them as well. By the way, you introduced me as chairman of the Bulgarian Fintech Association, but my main activity is founder of one of the main fintech businesses in Bulgaria. We are a new generation payments challenger, and we are on card rails, bank rails, and own rails. So Michael, is very similar to what you set up, still in a very early stage, but we hope to make a much bigger company pretty soon, especially with these opportunities opening now with the shaken up situation in payments.
Yeah, I will be asking you guys, all of you guys, about leading fintechs in your countries. Michael, one more topic. Cosmin mentioned regulatory sandboxes. You're also representative of the Austrian government and present the startup ecosystem on behalf of the government. So you have also the regulatory insights. In the last legislating period, there was a sandbox in the Ministry of Finance, I think, represented. Is fintech still a topic on the government side?
Yes, there are a lot of issues in the program of the government now, and the regulatory sandbox is one of the topics there. We hope that it will become live now in autumn this year, but we will see how quickly they can now set it up. Personally, I'm an absolutely fan of this regulatory sandbox. As I told before, if I would be happy 20 years ago to have something similar, a young startup, a couple of guys starting out a business. Let's do them for the first 1 to 3 years, their business. And if they prevail, if they have a certain threshold of, let's say, 1 million volume or whatever, 10 employees, then we can start with all the regulatory issues. But please, in order to be innovative for all those countries and all those regions where you are, just let those startups begin, and if they prevail a certain threshold, then you can start full with the regular sandbox. I think this is a major impact for fintech companies.
Aniko, do you have regulatory sandboxes in Hungary?
Actually, yes, we have a sandbox at the Central Bank of Hungary since 2018, and via this sandbox we can give waivers from central bank decrees. And even though these are a limited sphere of regulatory requirements, we have the areas then can be interesting for the fintechs, like the KYC requirements. So actually, within the discussions that we have in the Innovation Hub, KYC is the most popular topic. So the banks want to provide their customers online onboarding solutions, and how they are doing the KYC, how they are doing the AML compliance. They have huge freedom. And since the central bank regulates these requirements, we can develop our own requirement based on all these discussions in the Innovation Hub and in what we have in the regulatory sandbox.
Perfect. Valerie was already mentioning his own fintech, so I'd like to ask all of you, and Valerie, let's go back to you. What are the leading fintechs in your ecosystems, and what are they doing? What kind of problems are they solving? What kind of business models are they, so to say, pursuing? Give us some overview, please.
Look, in Bulgaria, we have about 52 fintechs, and a large part of them is in payments. Actually, the biggest one of them is in payments. Then we have others which are in the technology area, and this is a bridge that I make to funding. In Bulgaria, the total funding so far for fintechs is about 60 million, and this is up to last year. But most of it is concentrated in one technology company. This year with my fintech investment, I did the first funding round, so it's 5 million more. I think payments is the most important aspect in Bulgaria. There are a lot of people from the big payments companies who went into the different fintechs. There is amazing talent, and that's why the Financial Times published some time ago that Bulgaria is one of the top, Sofia actually is the top city globally in order to set up your fintech. So I think we'll be seeing a lot of fintechs coming out of Bulgaria.
Cosmin, what about in Romania?
So in Romania, I will start first of all to tell you this, but I want also to add something on the other questions. So in Romania, it's not a focus only on payments or only on infrastructure or technology. We have several big technology companies that are raising right now millions, but I cannot say some figures. What's very interesting for us in Romania is that we have like a snowdrop, which is the unicorn UiPath. And this snowdrop like triggers a lot of founders to take this path of funding technological companies. And fintech is one of the area in which we see a lot of dynamic. We also started this year to make ourselves heard as a Romanian Fintech Association. It was launched in January. We got together all of the biggest fintechs. We have also fintechs that are present with services in Poland, in Hungary, in UK, and some other parts of the world, not only Europe. And what we see is just a head start. I believe a lot in fintech in CEE, and this is something that I want to also to tell you, because you spoke about competition, and I believe the right thing to do in Central and Eastern Europe is to speak about a lot about collaboration. And let me tell you why. We have all the fundamentals in these countries like Romania, Slovenia, Bulgaria, Hungary, with a lot of tech innovation talent in our countries. We have also some VC funds coming and funding this kind of businesses right now. So what we need to do is to be like a team. And for example, we started, and I will tell you some examples. In February was Valerie, then we did that a joint event in Sofia, our association with your association. We were there.
Great. It was great, yes.
It was just before the coronavirus, so we started this. With Budapest FinTech, we do a lot of events, and not only on a monthly basis, but from time to time. We are in good collaboration also with the Hungarian ecosystem. And let me tell you just a story of collaborating within CEE. Within the lockdown, we are an open banking aggregation infrastructure, and we were in a relationship, regional relationship with a Hungarian bank to do open banking for the Croatian subsidiary. So what we did in Croatia, from our homes, working from home, and with testers in Croatia, we connected 90% of the Croatian market. And right now, that APIs that used to be untouched before Finquer started to work on them, they are working. And we had a lot of collaboration, not only with our customer, which is the subsidiary of the Hungarian bank, but with all the local banks, because they wanted us to use our expertise in order to test and make their APIs working. So it was quite amazing. I cannot express how nice it was within the coronavirus lockdown, with a big earthquake in Zagreb, a Romanian team of techies with a Hungarian bank and with a Croatian bank working together to make open banking working.
This is fantastic, Max. Maybe back to you. It's a good question, Cosmin, of how to support your local fintech ecosystems. But this is going beyond that. You're supporting the regional ecosystem. So, Max, I think you're quite active in that as well, be it with the Elevator Lab or other activities in your subsidiaries, in your network banks. What's your take on the collaboration? And also, we have 4 countries represented now, but obviously you have an overview of other subsidiaries as well. I think Tatra Bank in Slovakia is very active in the fintech space. So some other examples of what kind of fintech activities are we seeing in CE region would be the second question.
Again, I think here the open banking, and Cosmin gave a wonderful example, gives the opportunity of collaboration throughout the region. Yeah? PSD2 did not prescribe exactly which APIs you need to imply. There is some freedom, so all countries do it a bit different. But in general, what you can do and how you can share data, how you can actually access data of banks also abroad, will probably harmonize throughout the next months and years. And we as a banking group, we lay the fundamentals within our group now on a technical side, that we can actually have a group-wide API infrastructure where it doesn't matter if you actually develop against our APIs in the Czech Republic or in Slovakia, but you will in the future be able, when you develop something in our sandbox with our APIs, that you can actually use it group-wide, no matter in which country you are. And those are scaling abilities that are very important, especially in a region like Central and Eastern Europe, where we have fragmented small markets. Yeah, we compared to Western Europe, compared to the US or to Asia, we are fragmented small markets. Yeah, we need to be very aware of that, and of course, to create innovation, I think we also need to overcome this fragmentation. So this, I think, a banking group like RBI is also an enabler, has to be an enabler in this development.
Michael, you're an investor, a current investor in many fintechs. You had already a few exits. What kind of products are they building currently? And then in a second question, I will ask you, it must be some kind of, I was just thinking, mind-blowing for you to listen to this discussion, banks opening up for so to say, fintechs. If you look at 20 years ago, if you had this environment today and founded PaySafeCard in this year, I mean, it's completely different situation to start our business.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a completely different situation. However, I would assume that if we would not have found it 20 years ago, somebody else would come up with the product for prepaid cards. So first come, first serve, even if the market circumstances are harder. Yes, I have some fintech companies in my portfolio. I have now 37 investments in companies, and a couple of them are fintech. For example, Wikifolio, maybe it's very well known. With Wikifolio, every single internet user can put his own portfolio live, and other internet users can invest real money in this portfolio. It's quite an interesting product. Of course, Wikifolio was hard hit by a Corona shutdown. The market went down by a third, and so did Wikifolio. They went down very heavily. However, in the past 2 or 3 weeks, Wikifolio recovered as the markets recover. So we have seen the strongest trading days in the history of Wikifolio. So yes, the Corona crisis is already overcome, at least for the company Wikifolio. There are a couple of other companies. I had 2 exits last year. One was Payworks. Maybe you know this company. They're doing mobile POS, mobile point of sales terminals. They were exited to Visa. Visa acquired them last year. And the other one is a super name called iyzico. It's a Turkish payment service provider. By its name, the first Turkish PSP, which had all the licenses for Turkey. And these were exited to PayU, a South African company. So we're lucky, an early angel investor for those 2 companies as well.
We have a few questions on Hop-in, so I think, Max, give it to you or whoever feels to be able to answer it. If CEE banks are branches of big EU banks, rather, how do you assess their decision power in tech implementation versus having tech cascaded from the headquarter? Was that clear?
I'll try to answer it.
Yeah.
RBI Group is very strong because our banks are not merely branches of the head office. Yeah? There are individual banks and they can serve the market in a way how it is best for the market. But it is rather the other way around. The open banking infrastructure can actually enable companies, fintech companies that develop locally their first pilot projects, their first development, and create the first B2B traction, customers with other banks, serving banks with Raiffeisen in Bulgaria or in Hungary, will be able to much easier scale. And of course, this is then again interesting for us as investors, for Michael, for me, because scalability in the end counts, and B2B sales are always, and especially in these Corona times, harder to do. But when you achieve it, then you have also a very stable customer base, and especially if this customer can then support you with the scaling. And here, I think RBI with this clear inroad into the bank, with these elevator labs where you can prove yourself with the first pilot projects, where you can develop against the standardized API infrastructure and then scale into group solutions, get funding from Elevator Ventures. I know I'm now doing a bit of advertisement, but it is the core of what I think open banking can enable, that can easier scale throughout the region.
And you're obviously building an ecosystem, let's call it an ecosystem of technologists, of product people, of business people around the topic. And I think that's very, very important work to do. Maybe Annika, I'd like to ask you, this is the bank side. Where do you see the role of national banks, of central banks, to contribute into this relationship between fintechs and banks or institutions such as yours? Maybe in particular, what do you do?
Thank you for the question. So actually, our central bank attaches a special importance to digitalization, and therefore we have founded an executive directorate directly responsible for digitalization and fintech development under my direction last year. And so the first step or move of the area was to set up the fintech strategy of the central bank. In this fintech strategy, we identified 24 action points for the next 2 years that should be implemented either by the central bank itself or by other central authorities, the government, in terms of regulation, so that we could have a very vivid, developed fintech ecosystem in Hungary. Why do we think that we have to be very active in this field? Because we see that there are already a lot of innovative fintech products around, and we do believe that Hungarian customers also deserve that they would have the choice to have very modern, personalized, reasonable priced digital solutions, also provided from Hungarian banks, from Hungarian fintechs. And so since it is not the case yet, we also work very hard on helping the banking system to overcome this challenge and to achieve the digital transformation, not only on the front end, but also at the back end. And at the other angle, we also try to facilitate the growth of the local fintech ecosystem. We also published our first fintech and digitalization report, also in English, of course, which describes the Hungarian fintech ecosystem. So this report was published in April, and based on February figures, we have around 120 fintechs active in Hungary, and about 90% of them are export oriented, so it's not quite easy to identify them. So we need to use a web scraping technique to identify who are the Hungarian fintechs, and also the central bank had the initiative in its strategy that we would like to welcome a Hungarian Fintech Association to be established.
It's fantastic to see how these ecosystems are growing. Cosme and Valeria are talking about their foundations and associations. Obviously, you're trying to do it group-wide as well. Austria is growing in this. It's fantastic times, I guess, really for growing your business here. I will take another question from Hop-in. We're running a little bit out of time. I have a few questions more, so let's speed up a little bit. PSD2, and thank you, Robert, for all the questions in Hop-in. PSD2 from 2015 is not defining any standards, but only the legal framework. Are the European activities of, for example, the Berlin Group or the European Payment Initiative known to you, which are trying to stop this fragmentation and build real technical European standards? I'm not sure, Cosmin, maybe you have an overview on these activities?
The story is like this. Some of the countries in our region started to, because the RTSs from European Banking Association are not defining a quite technical standard. Like the API should have these exact fields in this exact structure. It started to become like a thing to do. It's to create groups between banks and to create some kind of standard. You know, like in telecom communication, to give you like an example, in telecom communication, it is that GSM standard or 5G standard. In open banking, in PSD2 implementation, there is no such a standard. And this makes very difficult for somebody, for a smart-minded fintech founder, if he wants to use in a front-end application and to connect 100 banks, it is quite impossible, because there is a need for an infrastructure like us to be a middleware, to normalize the data from different standards and to give only a pipe of data at the end so that the application can work. And this is indeed because there is not a single standard. I would say that there are requirements and flavors of implementation. A Berlin Group is a flavor of implementation taken by some banks and said, okay, let's use this. There is in Czech Republic, there is a local standard. In Poland, there is Polish standard API. So it was like some discussions between the banks. Let's do something similar. But the real fact is that there is not a GSM standard throughout Europe, and that's why it's quite impossible to do roaming between banks, and you need infrastructure like us, like Finquare, to normalize and to create the technological platform for the fintech innovation.
I think the collaboration is really crucial and super important, but there is obviously also competition. Let's not deny that. So Valerie, I will go to you. Bulgaria claims in this new atlas to be one of the fastest growing fintech ecosystems in general. Do you support this statement? First question, and obviously if yes, what are your secret sauces? What are your, so to say, reasons for that? What do you differently than others?
No, I definitely support the statement, and actually there are more and more fintechs coming up every quarter in Bulgaria. Now, one of the main things is that even from socialist times, Bulgaria was the high-tech place in the whole of the Soviet region. So there was a big stress on education. The first computer was made in Bulgaria, Pravets, then the first CD and all that. And this attracted a lot of the foreign big companies which made their IT centers in Bulgaria. Then a lot of the payment companies came and they set up operations. So we have a trained, talented people and a lot of IT engineers who are actually the foundation of that. And once they work for several years in a big company, Bulgarians are very entrepreneurial. So if they get the experience and they want to set up businesses. So after that, it was the EU funding. And a lot of those, the 11 Launch Hub, they spent a lot of money on promoting businesses. So basically, all those little guys, they believe that this is actually possible. And now with the more advanced funds coming in and more money coming in, this is a story happening. You know, SumUp has a very big operation in Bulgaria. PaySafe, you know, Michael, has probably almost 1,000 people in Bulgaria. SafeCharge has one of the biggest, they have more than 400 people in Bulgaria. So pretty much everybody is here. So, and that's why I said payments is one of the major things, because this is what these people know.
Do you expect strong boost for the industry through the Corona crisis for the payment sector of fintech?
I do. Actually, everybody that I'm speaking with, they say that things are much better now. And efficiency is much better. I can tell you in our organizations, in the companies where I'm invested and I'm developing, we actually let some people go, but we hired many more new people. And things are moving better because we are much more organized. You do calls which are 30 minutes, and this is the same as a management meeting where you're sitting in the office for 1 hour.
Last year, for the first edition of the Atlas, we had a press conference in Vienna physically, which was great, but it was restricted to Vienna. Now we are speaking to the whole CEE region, so it's a big benefit.
Absolutely. I think Corona gives us all the chance of a huge leap forward in consumer behavior, in digitalization, and everyone is actually needs to see also the chances of this development. And there are a lot of, and you gave some good examples in the payment industry, but there are a lot of companies who are actually seeing also the opportunities. There are a lot, of course, of challenges still, but there are some industries and verticals also in the fintech area that in the long run might actually benefit.
I have to ask Cosmin if he agrees with Valerie on this #1 leading position in the CEE ecosystem. Let's have some competition on the panel. Cosmin, what's your take on that?
Okay. So my friend Valerie, I admire him very much because he is quite optimistic, and he praises a lot the technological engineering heritage from the communist area. We are also having this in our country. So we had the big industries and a lot of engineers and Polytechnic University, which made very important talents in terms of technology. I'm okay if the Bulgarians are going in the payments with this margin decreasing. It's a very good thing for us not to go there. And I want to tell you something else, and to my friend Valerie. Look, in all our pitch decks, in Finquare's pitch decks, we say that Central and Eastern Europe is our home market. Not Romania, not Bulgaria, not Croatia, because we are also present in Croatia and so on. And Central and Eastern Europe includes Austria. So hopefully we'll have some business very soon in Austria. So I believe that the best approach for our companies is not to praise themselves how good they are in front of their Bulgarian peers or Hungarian peers, but collaborate together. Give me your API with payments and I will aggregate it in my one API solution. And then we can do some business together in Sweden, maybe. And I believe this is the right thing to do.
Michael, maybe from Austrian perspective, do you see yourself as an investor in fintech space, also part of a CEE ecosystem, or do you look to the Western Europe when you try to grow, for example, or look for investment? Is this space already on your radar, or you think that it could be more intense?
Yeah. To be very honest, I'm picking up by what's coming before my gun, to say it this way. There's no specific search of Western, Eastern Europe. But having said that, I always say every region that forms it up is a very good soil. We all love our own countries. I love Austria, I love Vienna, and we all know it's on the radar. It's on itself as a startup ecosystem. It's very far beyond. By the way, we now have it done first time in history that we are in the startup report first time mentioned Vienna with in a place place 100. So what I want to say is every country from us is a very good market, but a single market. So every effort to come to make a region out of this single market is very good, and that's why I really adore and love the initiative of Raiffeisen, RBI, and all the other players to see with the whole region we can prevail. One single country, we will always be far ahead of Tel Aviv and Silicon Valley, but working together, then we have a chance. And that's why it's so important for me to form the CE region and prevail then internationally.
Fantastic. Final question, Max, your direction. Obviously, if we want to prevail, we need funding. We need ecosystem collaboration, but we need funding, we need accelerators. And last year, I think 2019 was super successful for RBI on this level. 4th edition, I think, of Elevator Labs, new venture arm that you created from this year as a so to say independent legal unit. So do you see enough venture capital in the space in the region for the fintechs? Do you see enough activities such as yours to support fintechs on their scale?
As I said, I think the VC and investment field in the region is maturing, and most importantly, it's maturing in local with local investors. I think also the Corona crisis has shown how important it is for the particular startups that you have an investor in that is not hundreds of kilometers away from where you sit or where you do your business, but who actually can seriously and realistically assess your situation in your country or your particular industry that you're in. And in that sense, it's great to see Bulgaria, Romania, there is Gapminder, there's 11, there are here in Austria, we have Speed Invest and many others. These local investors, I think, play a very, very important role. We as a regional banking group see ourselves as an investor where we can come in a stage where the growth capital is needed, where we can actually not only support with the capital, but also with our network, with our know-how. And when we can somehow grow this environment of VC investors locally and across the region, I'm very positive on the development of the next years in fintech in CE.
Perfect. Maybe the final question, the same question to Cosmin, Valerie, and Aniko. Do you see other banks in your ecosystems as well developing their venture arms? Do you see institutional investors entering the fintech market? Do you see enough of capital for growing your companies?
So since it is my last intervention, I want to praise, because Maximilian is not so loud in praising Elevator Lab program. 2 years ago, we were the local hero, and the first money that we got, we were just a pitch deck at that point, were from Raiffeisen as an award for the Elevator Lab local hero. And I want to tell this because it helped us to get our trust in our project. we are bank agnostic, and I will say that it's not praising Raiffeisen. We are working with Hungarian, with Croatian, with Romanian banks as well. But what is Raiffeisen doing very well is that it takes this lead of trying to put all together the CEE ecosystem. I saw last year when I was pitching at Pioneers the first printed version of Atlas Fintech, and I said, "Oh wow, this is good, guys." So they started to do it, yeah. And right now, this year, I wanted to be somehow invited, so they invited me spontaneously. But it was very good for me to contribute to this new version. And what I see in terms of investing, it's to go back to your question, is there are more and more VC funds. For example, Gapminder that Maximilian mentioned from Romania is our backer. So they put early seed money in our company. And what I see also is that not only Raiffeisen is doing partnership startup programs. I believe that the most important thing right now for a fintech, it's very important to get out of this vicious cycle of not having customers, and the customers are not, the prospects don't want to work with you because you don't have customers. So the POC partnership programs like Raiffeisen and some other banks that are starting right now at the local level, not a decision only from the headquarters, it's the right thing to do, and I encourage any bank to do it.
And we encourage, in addition, the countries to enable regulatory sandboxes so that these POCs can really be executed. Maybe final question, the same question, Valerie and Anniko, to you as well. Enough funding in your countries?
I would say funding would never be enough in our country. There are good companies coming out. Now, there are several other banks that started investing, local banks. One of them is Varengold Bank. They invested in Claire, a funding, they invested in Claire. And then Bulgarian American Credit Bank, which invested in three fintech companies, in two fintech companies, Paynetics and Fire. But there should be more of that coming. And I see that banks are showing interest already because things are moving in the right direction. I think what Raiffeisen is doing, it's an amazing thing because it does it for the whole region, and it really unites people, and it gives the hope that they can fund their businesses through them.
Max, I don't think you can do better marketing for your ecosystem. Anniko, on the final note, what about in Hungary?
So I totally agree with Valerie that money cannot be enough in this field, and so we have three banks who has already incubators, and also one at the insurance side, and some other big VC investors. We at the central bank would like to open up the possibility for crowdfunding as well, to be legally accessible in Hungary. And as I see the FintechAtlas publication of this year, I would like to welcome the Raiffeisen Elevator Lab to be even more active locally in Hungary and find more talent and more business opportunities. Thank you.
Fantastic discussion, guys. Thank you so much for all these insights. The space is really growing. It was new to me to have these in-depth insights in the CEE startup fintech ecosystem in particular. Max, thank you. On our behalf, I think your partners were the best advertisers for you. I think we didn't even have any, so to say, questions or whatever organized for that. And it was very spontaneous. So I really appreciate your insights on that and your initiatives. Maybe give us just a final touch on where we can download the Fintech Atlas. How is the next process with it?
Just go very easy on fintechatlas.com and you find a free downloadable version of the complete Fintech Atlas. Feel free to do it. fintechatlas.com.
For free.
For free, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for all the questions. Some of them we couldn't take, but we'll try to make sure to answer them afterwards. Thank you for being with us on this presentation of CEE Fintech Atlas by RBI. Thanks for joining us for our questions, and thanks for all the panelists for their time. That was it from Vienna. Ciao and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Ciao.